The Unicorn, Chapter 4, Tabby's Trip. Ben and Pearl skidded to a stop outside the tall wrought iron gate that guarded the old button factory. A heavy padlock hung from the bars, along with a sign that read, "Welcome to Dr. Wu's Worm Hospital. Dr. Wu does not treat cats, dogs, pigs, rats, snakes, turtles, fish, frogs, or any other creature that is not a worm. Dr. Wu sees worms by appointment only. If you don't have an appointment, keep out." Fortunately, Pearl and Ben had an appointment. Their apprenticeships were scheduled to begin at precisely 8 a.m. "We're 2 minutes early," Ben reported. "Early is better than late," Pearl said. She didn't want to give Dr. Wu a reason to fire her. With her hands wrapped around the bars, Pearl peered through the gate, watching for the hospital's front door to open. Would Mr. Tabby come to get them, or would Dr. Wu? The concrete building, which had once housed the Button Factory, stood 10 stories high. Many of the windows were broken. The ground surrounding the structure had been neglected, so weeds grew up to Pearl's knees. In its glory days, the Button Factory had been filled with the sounds of machinery grinding, people chatting, and delivery trucks coming and going. Now only an occasional growl escaped through the broken panes. The place looked like a hotel for ghosts. At 8 o'clock precisely, the doorknob turned. Pearl's heart did a little flutter. This was always an exciting moment, anticipation building like steam in a kettle. The front door opened, and out stepped Dr. Wu's assistant, Mr. Tabby. He always looked like a butler, and today was no different. He wore a pair of perfectly pressed black pants, a crisp white shirt, and a burgundy velveteen vest. His long red hair was tied back in a ribbon, and his mustache was waxed into individual strands. As he strode down the driveway, gravel crunched beneath his polished black shoes. "What's he carrying?" Pearl asked. "Looks like a suitcase," Ben said. Indeed, while one of Mr. Tabby's hands held a ring of keys, the other pulled a wheeled plaid bag. Pearl and Ben stepped back while Mr. Tabby unlocked the padlock. The brass key ring reminded Pearl of the kind that bulls wore in their snouts. Then Mr. Tabby swung open the gate. "Good morning," he said, his nose sniffing the air. A low growl vibrated in his throat. "Do I detect the scent of dachshund?" "Dachs what?" Pearl asked. "That's the official name for wiener dogs," Ben explained. Then he held his palms up to Mr. Tabby's nose. "I petted a pair of them." "They belong to my great-aunt Gladys," Pearl told him. "Wow, you've sure got a good sniffer." "I am not fond of dogs, wiener or otherwise." Mr. Tabby's upper lip curled with disgust. "Canines are drooling creatures that do their business on public sidewalks. Very distasteful." He leaned close to Ben. "What sort of hat is that?" "Oh, I forgot I was wearing it," Ben said, pulling the knitted yellow cap from his head. "My great-aunt Gladys made it," Pearl said. "She's made me one in every color. Do you want her to make you one?" Mr. Tabby stroked one of his mustache sections. "I am not fond of hats, knitted or otherwise. They tend to mess up my hair." He rolled his suitcase onto the sidewalk. "Are you leaving?" Ben asked, stuffing the hat into his back pocket. "Indeed, I am taking my once-a-year vacation." "Where are you going?" Pearl asked. She and her family rarely took vacations. They worked so hard at the dollar store that it was difficult to get away. "I am visiting a luxurious spa where I will get a manicure, a pedicure, and a relaxing scalp massage." Was he making a purring sound? It is very stressful being the assistant to the world's only veterinarian for imaginary creatures. Too much stress can make my fur fall out. "Fur?" Pearl asked. "Did you say fur?" Mr. Tabby glanced away. "I never said such a thing." A taxicab pulled up to the curb. The driver got out. "You the gentleman I'm supposed to take to the airport?" "That is correct, my good man." Mr. Tabby smiled politely. He handed his suitcase to the driver, who put it into the taxi's trunk. While the driver climbed back into the cab, Mr. Tabby gave the key ring to Ben. Be certain to lock the gate and do not forget to... I know, Ben interrupted. Don't forget to lock the front door. You don't have to keep reminding me. Ben was a bit sensitive about this subject. He'd neglected to lock the front door the first time he and Pearl visited the hospital, resulting in the escape of the Sasquatch. Mr. Tabby's mustache twitched. It is my duty to remind you of such things, especially in light of the new situation. His yellow irises flashed. A little shiver tickled the back of Pearl's neck. What situation? My trip is ill-timed, I'm afraid, but Dr. Wu insists I go. Mr. Tabby looked over his shoulder. The taxi driver sat inside the car, paying no attention to the conversation. Mr. Tabby motioned for the kids to gather close. As they looked up at him, he lowered his voice in a very secretive way. There has been a sighting. A what? Ben asked. A sighting, in the imaginary world, of a human. Pearl and Ben looked at each other. Mr. Tabby had said the word human as if he was talking about a piece of food that had gone rancid. Mr. Tabby continued, Because we do not know how the human entered the imaginary world, we must increase our security efforts. The hospital gate and front door are to remain locked at all times. Ben's cheek turned red. I won't leave it unlocked again, I promise. And rules are to be followed at all times. Do you understand? Pearl didn't argue. She and Ben had been apprentices for less than a week, and already they'd broken more rules than she could remember, including traveling through the portal without permission and taking the leprechaun out of the hospital. Yes, they both replied. We understand. Very good. Now do you remember your task for today? He tapped his shoe against the sidewalk as he waited for the reply. Yes, Ben said. We have to trim the Sasquatch's nose hairs. To precisely 1/4 inch in length, Mr. Tabby said. Pearl groaned. Ugh, that sounds super disgusting. Do we have to? Do you have to? Mr. Tabby's mustache twitched again. Need I remind you that on Wednesday you did not dispose of dragon droppings in the correct manner, hence your punishment. Okay, Pearl said. She really couldn't argue about this. After all, it had been her idea to toss the droppings over the edge of the roof. You will find the trimming device in the supply closet. It requires 10 batteries. Sasquatch nasal foliage is very stubborn and thick. He turned briskly on his heels and strode toward the cab. After slipping inside, he rolled down the window and gave Pearl and Ben one last bit of information. In light of the dangerous situation, I installed extra security behind the front door. Good day. Dangerous? Ben asked. He and Pearl watched as the cab drove away. How dangerous? One thing Pearl had learned about Ben Silverstein was that he didn't like danger. He didn't like breaking rules either. I'm sure he was exaggerating, Pearl said, trying to make Ben feel better. Come on, let's go in. Ben locked the gate, checking it twice to make sure it was secure, and then they headed up the driveway.